The brunch was supposed to be my sister's coronation, a celebration of the gold membership card she had spent 10 years chasing, under the Stonegate chandeliers. She was glowing, and our parents were beaming at her purchase status. Then my phone vibrated, and a single email subject line sucked the oxygen right out of the room. She looked at my screen and went pale. She had just bought her way into a club, but I was about to be invited out of her shadow forever. My name is Daria Snowcroft, and if there is one thing I have learned from 34 years of navigating the coastline of Merriwick, Massachusetts, it is that acceptance is a currency, and my family has always been overdrawn. The Sunday brunch at Stonegate Harbor Country Club was less of a meal and more of a tactical exercise in social dominance. The air inside the main dining room was conditioned to a crisp 68 degrees, smelling faintly of lemon polish, old mahogany, and the specific, metallic scent of cold, hard cash. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Atlantic Ocean churned in a gray, restless chop, but inside, the water in the crystal goblets was perfectly still. A jazz trio played in the corner, a soft, neutered version of a Coltrane standard that was designed to be ignored, merely a sonic wallpaper for the real performance happening at the tables. I sat at the far end of the table, nursing a glass of fresh-squeezed orange juice. Beside me, my husband, Derek Ashfield, was methodically buttering a piece of sourdough toast. He moved with the quiet economy of a man who had seen enough real chaos in his life that the manufactured drama of a country club brunch could not raise his pulse by a single beat. He was my anchor, heavy and silent, keeping me from drifting away into the violent currents of my family's expectations. Today was not about us. Today was the coronation of my sister, Tessa. She sat at the head of the table, a position usually reserved for our father, but today she had claimed it by right of conquest. In the center of the table, resting on the white linen tablecloth like a religious artifact, lay the object of our gathering. It was a membership card, not the standard slate gray card for social members, and certainly not the embarrassing white card for seasonal guests. This one was gold, embossed with the Stonegate crest, a lighthouse crossing 2 golf clubs, and beneath her name, it bore the 3 words that constituted the holy trinity of Merriwick society: full voting member. The waiter, a man named Henri, who had worked at Stonegate long enough to know which wives were sleeping with the tennis pros and which husbands were leveraging their second mortgages, approached the table with a bottle of champagne. He did not ask who was paying. He knew the hierarchy. He tilted the bottle toward Tessa with a deferential nod that was practiced to perfection. "For the new member," Henri said, his voice smooth as buttercream. "Compliments of the board, Mrs. Calloway." Tessa's face flushed with a pleasure so intense it looked almost painful. She touched the card with a manicured fingernail, tapping it twice against the linen. The sound was dull, but to her, it must have sounded like a gavel bringing order to the universe. "Thank you." "Henri," she said, her voice pitched just loud enough for the table of maritime lawyers next to us to hear. "It has been a long journey. 10 years on the waiting list. Can you believe it? 10 years of patience. Quality cannot be rushed." "Madame," Henri replied, pouring the champagne. The bubbles rose in a frantic rush to escape, much like my desire to leave this room. My mother clasped her hands together, her eyes shimmering with tears that had nothing to do with maternal affection and everything to do with relief. She looked at Tessa as if my sister had just cured a rare disease, rather than simply paying an initiation fee that could have funded a small public library. "I always knew you would get off the wait list this year," Mother said, reaching out to squeeze Tessa's hand. "The committee knows quality people when they see them. It is just where you belong." "Tessa, finally, it is not just about belonging." "Mom," Tessa corrected, picking up her flute of champagne. "It is about access. The full voting membership means we are not just guests here anymore. We shape the club. We have a say in the legacy." She took a sip, her eyes scanning the room over the rim of the glass, checking to see who was watching her be important. They expedited my application. "You know, The membership director told me that with Richard's recent promotion and our charitable contributions last quarter, we were exactly the kind of young power couple Stonegate needed to revitalize the image. Father nodded, cutting into his eggs Benedict with aggressive pride. That is right. You do not just buy your way in here. You have to be someone. They do not let the riffraff in. No matter how big their checkbook is, I am proud of you. Sweetheart, you have secured your place. He did not ask what she planned to do with the membership. He did not ask if she enjoyed golf, or if she liked the food. He asked about her standing. That was the only metric that mattered in the Snowcroft household. You were either ascending, or you were invisible. I took another sip of orange juice, feeling the citric acid burn the back of my throat. I was 34 years old, a grown woman with a mortgage and a career that kept me awake 3 nights a week. Yet in this room, under the gaze of my parents and my sister, I felt myself shrinking. I was being edited down, cropped out of the family portrait to make more room for Tessa's gold card. Derek's hand found my knee under the table. His grip was warm and firm. He didn't look at me. He kept his eyes on the marina view. But the pressure of his hand was a silent message. I am here. We are real. This is theater. I needed that reminder. Because Tessa was turning her gaze toward me. She set her glass down, the bubbles settling. Her smile was tight, the kind of expression one wears when offering charity to the less fortunate. But enough about the club, Tessa said, her voice dripping with a faux magnanimity that set my teeth on edge. Daria, we have not heard a peep from you. How are things in the helping sector? She paused, letting the vague description hang in the air like a bad smell. She knew exactly what I did. Or at least, she knew the version I allowed her to know, but she preferred to wrap it in euphemisms that made it sound like a hobby. Work is busy, I said, keeping my voice neutral. We are closing out the fiscal year, so the audits are piling up. Audits? Tessa sighed, looking at our parents with a sympathetic shake of her head. It sounds so tedious. Daria, but I suppose it is noble, in a way, keeping the books straight for those little non-profits. It is a sweet way to give back to the community. There it was. Sweet, the diminutive adjective designed to pat me on the head while simultaneously pushing me down. She made my work at the Blackstone Civic Integrity Bureau sound like I was organizing bake sales for stray cats. She had no idea that the books I was currently auditing involved a network of shell companies moving millions of dollars through municipal contracts. She did not know that busy meant I had spent the last 3 weeks coordinating with forensic accountants to track illicit flows of capital that would make the Stonegate treasurer weep. But to tell her that would be to break the character they had assigned me. I was Daria the Quiet, Daria the Good Samaritan, Daria, the one who married a man with calloused hands and no trust fund. It has its moments, I said, refusing to take the bait. Well, we are just glad you have something that keeps you occupied, Mother chimed in. Buttering a roll. Not everyone is cut out for the high-pressure world Tessa and Richard live in. It is good that you found your niche. Derek shifted in his chair. The wood creaked. I felt his muscles tense. He was a man of infinite patience, but he had a low tolerance for condescension. Actually, Derek started, his voice low and gravelly, cutting through the jazz music. Daria's latest project is, oh, before I forget. Tessa interrupted, her voice rising an octave to drown him out. She turned to the woman approaching our table, a distant cousin named Beatrice, who had married into old textile money and spent her days floating between gin and tonics. Beatrice, darling, Tessa cried out. Extending a hand, Beatrice stopped, her pearls swinging. Tessa, I heard the news, Beatrice said, ignoring me entirely. Full voting. Welcome to the inner sanctum. Thank you. Beatrice, Tessa beamed. We must schedule a tea time. Richard is dying to play the back nine with your husband. Beatrice's eyes drifted to Derek and me. She squinted slightly, as if trying to recall who we were. And Derek, isn't it? I always forget. What is it you do again? Still in construction. It was an innocent enough question. Perhaps. But in Merriwick, Asking a man if he was in construction was a polite way of asking if he knew how to read. Derek had spent 15 years in emergency management and disaster response logistics. He had coordinated supply chains for hurricane relief and managed infrastructure grids during blizzards. He saved lives by moving mountains of steel and concrete. But before he could open his mouth, Tessa answered for him. "Oh, Derek is in site management," Tessa said quickly, waving her hand as if shooing away a fly. "He keeps things running, making sure the trucks arrive on time. It is very steady work. We are so happy they can live a quiet life without all the stress Richard has to deal with at the firm. They are such a nice, normal couple. Nice, normal, steady." She was building a cage around us with her words. She was framing us as the simpleton relations, the charitable cases allowed at the table to highlight her own brilliance. Derek looked at Tessa, his eyes narrowing slightly. He did not correct her. He simply picked up his water glass and took a long drink, the muscles in his jaw working. He was playing the long game, just as we had discussed 100 times. Do not engage. Do not feed the beast. I looked at my sister. She was glowing, radiant in her victory. She had the card. She had the narrative. She had the parents fawning over her. She believed, truly and deeply, that she had won the game of life, and for the first time in years, I felt a cold, hard stone of anger settle in my stomach. It wasn't the hot, reactive anger of a child. It was something older, heavier. It was the realization that my silence had not bought me peace. It had only purchased their contempt. I finished my orange juice and set the glass down on the heavy linen. The sound was distinct, a sharp clack of glass against glass that cut through the murmur of conversation. "That is interesting you mentioned stress," I said. My voice was soft, but I pitched it perfectly to slide under the jazz music. Tessa blinked, surprised that the furniture was speaking. "What stress?" I repeated, looking her dead in the eye. "You mentioned Richard's stress. It must be a lot. Managing all those assets." I paused, letting a beat of silence stretch just long enough to be uncomfortable. I suppose that is why Derek and I prefer our own pace. But speaking of invitations, I reached into my purse. I did not pull out the object. I just let my hand rest on the leather, grounding myself. "I received an invitation for next month as well," I said. I said it flatly. No fanfare, no excitement, just a statement of fact dropped onto the table like a lead weight. The table went quiet. Mother looked up from her fruit salad. Father frowned, confused by the deviation from the script. Tessa laughed. It was a brittle, high-pitched sound. "Oh, Daria, that is lovely. Is it for the library fundraiser? Or that animal shelter thing? I think Richard's firm bought a platinum table for that. Maybe we can get you seated near the back so you do not have to pay for a ticket." She was so sure. She was so absolutely certain that my world was small, that my horizons ended at the county line. She thought she was being benevolent, offering me a crumb from her table. "No," I said, "it is not a fundraiser." "Well, what is it then?" Tessa asked, her smile tight, impatience creeping in. "A gala. A networking mixer." I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the insecurity masked by the heavy makeup. I saw the desperate need to be superior. And I realized that if I spoke to her in the language of sisterhood, she would never hear me. She had forgotten that tongue long ago. She only spoke one language now, the language of power, of hierarchy, of exclusion. If that was the only language she understood, then I would have to become fluent. I did not answer her immediately. I looked at Derek. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. "Go ahead," his eyes said. "Drop the hammer." I turned back to my sister, keeping my face perfectly smooth, a mirror reflecting her own ambition back at her. "It is not a mixer, Tessa," I said, "and I do not think Richard can buy a table for it." Tessa rolled her eyes, picking up her menu. "You are being dramatic. Daria, if it is in Massachusetts, Richard can get a table. Just tell us what it is so we can move on. I want to order the crab cakes. It is not a ticket you can buy," I said, my voice dropping lower, forcing them to lean in. Because you are not invited to pay. You are invited to serve. Tessa paused. Menu hovering in midair. What on earth are you talking about? I smiled. It was the first time I had smiled all morning. I will show you, I said. And with that, I decided that the era of Daria the Quiet was over. The check was coming due, and for the first time in history, the Snowcroft family was about to realize they could not afford the bill. I unlocked my phone. The screen was bright, an artificial glare cutting through the subdued, ambient lighting of the dining room. I did not hold it up like a trophy. I did not clear my throat to demand attention. I simply turned the device around and placed it gently on the white tablecloth, right next to the crystal vase of hydrangeas. The movement was small, but in the vacuum of silence I had created, it felt seismic. Tessa leaned in, her eyes narrowing. She expected, I am sure, a Groupon for a spa day or a confirmation for a local Rotary Club luncheon. She expected something she could pat on the head. She read the subject line. I saw her lips move, silently forming the words. Formal invitation, royal delegation reception, distinguished address. It was not a save the date. It was not a you are invited to purchase tickets. It was a directive, a summons. The seal of the royal delegation was visible in the preview. A complex heraldry of lions and unicorns that looked absurdly out of place next to the remnants of our eggs Benedict. Tessa froze. Her face, usually so animated with the theater of social climbing, went slack. She blinked. Once, twice, trying to process the syntax. Royal delegation, she whispered. The words tasted foreign in her mouth. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The clinking of silverware from the surrounding tables faded into a dull buzz, irrelevant and distant. Let me see that, Father said. He reached for the phone, his hand trembling slightly not from age, but from the sudden destabilization of his world order. He picked it up, adjusting his reading glasses. He read it. Then he lowered the phone, looked at me, and then raised the phone to read it again. He was checking for the punchline. He was looking for the part where it said this was a prank, a spam email, a scam asking for wire transfers. It says distinguished address, Father muttered. Daria, this says you are giving an address. Yes, I said. My voice was steady. I am. To the delegation, Mother asked. Her voice was thin, high-pitched, like talking to them. Yes, I replied. Tessa shook her head, a sharp, jerky motion. I do not understand. The royal delegation is in town for the International Trade and Ethics Summit. Tickets are $5,000 a plate just to sit in the overflow room. How did you get this? I did not buy a ticket. Tessa, I said. Derek leaned forward then. He placed his elbows on the table, clasping his hands. He looked at the phone in Father's hand with a professional detachment. Actually, Daria, Derek said, his voice dropping to a register that commanded absolute attention. Check the sender domain, if they sent that through the diplomatic channel. We need to file the security clearance forms by Tuesday. We cannot have a repeat of the Brussels clearance delay. Boom, if the email was the grenade. Derek had just pulled the pin. Brussels. Security clearance. Diplomatic channel. My sister looked at Derek as if he had just spoken in Mandarin. This was the man she had just moments ago described as being in site management, the man she thought moved piles of dirt for a living. Brussels, Tessa asked. Her voice cracked. What happened in Brussels? It is classified, Derek said simply. He didn't smile. He didn't smirk. He just closed the door on her curiosity with the heavy thud of federal bureaucracy. Mother looked at me, her eyes wide, searching my face for a stranger. Daria? Where do you work? I thought you worked for that non-profit assistance group, the one that helps community things. I took a sip of water. The ice cubes clinked against the glass. I never said I worked for a non-profit assistance group. Mother, you said that, and I just stopped correcting you because you never listened to the correction. Then where, Father demanded. Where's the paycheck coming from? The Blackstone Civic Integrity Bureau. I said. The name landed on the table like a lead bar. It was heavy. It was unyielding. It sounded nothing like charity. It sounded like subpoenas. It sounded like audits. It sounded like the kind of place that did not have casual Fridays. Blackstone, Tessa repeated. She looked sick. I have heard of them. They do data analysis for urban planning. Among other things, I said. We specialize in forensic accounting and structural integrity of public funds. Tessa's face went from pale to a blotchy red. The panic was setting in. It wasn't just jealousy, though, that was there. Burning hot and bright, it was fear. She had spent years, literally years, curating a specific narrative about our family to the Marowak elite. She was the star, the success, the power broker. I was the sweet, slightly dim-witted sister who worked in community service and married a blue-collar worker. It was a perfect foil for her brilliance, but if I was consulting for royal delegations, if I was getting security clearances for Brussels, then she was a liar, and not just a liar, but a fool who didn't even know her own sister. You never told us, Tessa stammered. Why would you hide this? We could have used this. Do you know how many people at the club would kill to have a connection to the Blackstone Bureau? That, I said, pointing a finger at her gold membership card, is exactly why I never told you. But the royals, Mother interrupted, unable to get past the glittering title. Why are they inviting you? What could you possibly have to say to them? They are interested in my research, I said, on the intersection of philanthropic fraud and high society gatekeeping. The words hung in the air. Philanthropic fraud, high society gatekeeping. Tessa stiffened. Her husband, Richard, who had been silently eating his melon this whole time, suddenly stopped chewing. He looked at me, his eyes dark and alert. That is a heavy topic for a brunch conversation, Richard said. It was the first time he had spoken directly to me in months. It is a heavy topic for the world, I replied. Hence the invitation. Tessa laughed nervously. Well, I am sure it is just a panel, one of those things where 10 people sit on stage and nod. Still, good for you. Daria, maybe I can ask the event coordinator if I can get a +1 pass since my sister is presenting. It is not a panel, Tessa, I said. It is a distinguished address, solo, 30 minutes, followed by a Q&A with the delegation. Tessa looked at the phone again. She looked at the words, distinguished address. There was no wiggle room. There was no way to minimize this. You are going to humiliate us, she whispered. You are going to go up there, in your off-the-rack suit, and you are going to talk about boring accounting, and people will know you are my sister, and they will think... They will think what? Derek asked. His voice was dangerous now. That you have a sister who is an expert in her field. That you are related to someone who actually does the work instead of just buying the title. They will think I lied, Tessa hissed. I told the membership committee that Daria was a social worker. I told them she was simple, safe, I repeated. The word tasted bitter. Yes, safe. Tessa was losing her composure now. The jazz music seemed to mock her rising hysteria. People here do not want investigators, Daria. They want peers. They want comfort. If they know what you do, if they know you are digging into things... She trailed off, realizing she had said too much. I reached out and took my phone back from Father. I slid it into my purse. I cannot control what you have told them about me, Tessa, I said, my voice calm, flat, and final. I cannot control the lies you use to build your little castle here, but I control the truth, and starting next month, I'm going to be speaking it very loudly, I signaled to Henri. The waiter. We will take the check for our portion, I said. No, Father said automatically. I pay. I always pay. Not today, I said. Derek and I have a government per diem to use up. We might as well stimulate the local economy. I stood up. Derek stood with me. We looked like giants next to them. Not because we were taller, but because for the first time, we were standing at our full height. Enjoy your membership, Tessa, I said. I hear the voting privileges are very empowering. We walked out. I did not look back, but I could feel their eyes boring into my back. 5 pairs of eyes staring at a stranger they had lived with for 30 years. The brunch was over. The hunger, however, was just beginning. The drive home was silent, but it was a comfortable silence, the kind that exists between 2 people who have just defused a bomb and are now driving the truck away from the blast zone. Derek drove. I watched the coastline of Marowak blur past the window, the grand estates, the high hedges, the gated driveways. It all looked different now. Before, it had looked like a fortress I was not allowed to enter. Now, it looked like a crime scene I was about to process. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Father. "We need to talk. Mom is crying. Tessa is hysterical. Call me." I turned the phone off. That night, the lights in my parents' house would have been burning late. I knew my father. He was a man of routine, but he was also a man who hated being the last to know something. He would be in his study, sitting at his heavy oak desk, the one he claimed was an antique, but was actually a high-end reproduction. He would open his laptop, he would open Google, and he would type Daria Snowcroft Blackstone Bureau. I can picture it perfectly. The blue light of the screen illuminating his confused frown. He would expect to find a LinkedIn profile with maybe 50 connections. He would expect to find a staff directory listing me as administrative assistant or outreach coordinator. Instead, he would have found the archives. He would have found the Marowak Gazette article from 3 years ago. City audit reveals $3 million in misallocated grant funds. He would scan the text, his eyes skimming over the dry legal jargon until he hit the paragraph that mattered. The discrepancy was first flagged by senior analyst Daria Snowcroft, whose forensic reconstruction of the ledger exposed a network of phantom vendors. He would blink. He would click the next link. Statewide task force indicts 4 in construction kickback scheme. The byline would mention a joint operation between state police and the Blackstone Bureau. The quote from the district attorney would be there. "We owe this breakthrough to the data modeling provided by Mrs. Snowcroft's team, which identified the pattern of inflated invoicing that had gone unnoticed for a decade." He would scroll down. He would see photos. Not photos of me holding a champagne glass on a red carpet, no. Photos of me walking out of a courthouse in a gray raincoat, carrying a box of files, looking exhausted but relentless. Photos of me sitting at a hearing table, pointing at a projection screen, explaining how a charitable foundation was actually a tax shelter for offshore gambling profits. He would see the date on that last article. It was the same date as Tessa's 35th birthday party, the party I had missed, the party where Tessa had told everyone I was too overwhelmed with my little volunteer work to attend. I had been deposed that day. I had spent 8 hours breaking down the complex financial architecture of a corrupt zoning board. Father would lean back in his chair. The silence of his house would feel oppressive. He would look at the screen, at the daughter he thought was a failure, and he would realize that while he and Tessa were busy trying to climb the social ladder, I had been busy inspecting the rungs to see which ones were rotten. The realization would be slow, but it would be absolute. I wasn't helping the community by handing out soup. I was helping the community by cutting out the tumors that were eating it alive. And then there was Derek. Father would type in Derek Ashfield Disaster Relief. Tessa had called him a site manager. She made it sound like he stood around wearing a hard hat and whistling at pedestrians. The search results would tell a different story. Logistics Chief Ashfield coordinates emergency supply chain for Hurricane Delta. FEMA commends Ashfield for grid restoration strategy in Sector 4. There would be a video clip from a news report 5 years ago. Derek, standing in mud up to his knees, shouting orders into a radio while a crane lifted a school bus out of a sinkhole. He looked fierce. He looked competent. He looked like a man who commanded respect not because he paid dues to a club, but because when the world fell apart, he was the one who put it back together. Derek knew the dark side of money better than anyone. He had seen it in the aftermath of every disaster. He saw where the relief funds went. He saw which contractors charged $10,000 for a tarp that cost $10. He saw how the generous donations from the wealthy often ended up in the pockets of their friends' construction companies. He was not just my husband, he was my source. He was the one who understood the mechanics of how things broke, while I understood the mechanics of how the money was stolen while it was breaking. Back at my parents' house, Tessa would be pacing. She would be trying to spin this. "She is probably just a mid-level staffer," Tessa would be saying to her husband, Richard. "You know how government titles are. They give everyone a fancy name. Senior analyst probably just means she knows how to use Excel. She is exaggerating. She has to be." But then father would find the PDF. It would be on the Blackstone Bureau's public transparency page. The agenda for the royal delegation's visit. Session 4. The Architecture of Complicity. Presenter Daria Snowcroft. Lead Auditor. Special Investigations Unit. Topic: Washing the Ledger, How Private Clubs and Charitable Foundations Facilitate Modern Money Laundering. I imagine the air leaving Tessa's lungs when father read that out loud. Private clubs, charitable foundations, the two pillars of Tessa's existence, the two things she valued more than oxygen. The invitation wasn't just an honor, it was a threat. Mother would be sitting on the sofa, clutching a throw pillow. But those business trips, she would whisper. She said she was going to seminars. She said she was going to training. She would remember the times I had come home with dark circles under my eyes, the times I had tried to talk about my day. "Mom, we found something really disturbing in the municipal water contracts today." "Oh, Daria, please," Mother would interrupt, adjusting a flower arrangement. "No one wants to hear about pipes and contracts. It is so depressing." "Did you see Tessa's new shoes? They are Italian leather. Dad, I think the city council is voting on a bill that has a loophole for developers. Politics." "Politics?" Father would wave his hand. "Leave that to the politicians. Sweetie, you worry about your little spreadsheets." I had tried. God knows I had tried. I had listed the facts like I was reading a police report. I had offered them the truth on a platter. But they had swatted it away because it wasn't served on fine china. I wasn't mid-level. I wasn't secretive for the sake of drama. I was secretive because every time I opened my mouth, they filled it with their own assumptions. And now, looking at that screen, Tessa would see the terrifying void opening up beneath her feet. She would look at Richard, who had just donated $50,000 to the Stonegate Renovation Fund to secure her membership. Richard, whose firm handled boutique investments for clients who preferred anonymity. If I was the expert on money laundering and private clubs, and they had just spent a fortune to join the most exclusive private club in the state, the question wouldn't be, is Daria lying? The question would be, does Daria know? Does Daria know where the $50,000 came from? Does Daria know why Richard's firm moves money through the Cayman Islands? Does Daria know that the charity gala they were all preparing for was run by the same people I was investigating? Tessa would look at her gold card. An hour ago, it was a ticket to heaven. Now, in the harsh light of the truth, it looked like evidence. I sat in my living room, watching Derek pour 2 glasses of cheap, honest wine. "They are freaking out," Derek said, glancing at his own phone, which was lighting up with notifications from my brother-in-law. "Let them," I said. "Panic is the first stage of realization, and the second stage, investigation," I said, taking the glass. "They are going to try to find dirt on me. They are going to try to discredit the messenger." "Good luck to them," Derek toasted. "Your record is cleaner than a surgical theater." "It is not my record I'm worried about," I said, looking out into the dark night. "It is theirs. Because the truth was, I hadn't looked into Richard's finances yet. I hadn't crossed the streams. I had kept my family life and my work life separated by a thick wall of silence, but the royal invitation had just smashed that wall down. And now, I had a terrible feeling that when I stood up to give that speech about money laundering and private clubs, I wouldn't just be talking about abstract concepts. I would be talking about my sister's brunch. The game had changed. I wasn't just the little sister anymore. I was the auditor, and the audit had just begun. The war did not begin with a cannon blast. In Marowak, Wars never do. They begin with the soft, persistent buzzing of a phone on a granite countertop, signaling the arrival of a text message that has been carefully drafted, edited, and polished to inflict maximum damage with minimum liability. Monday morning arrived with a sky the color of a bruised plum. I was in my home office, a converted sunroom that looked out over the marshland, a stark contrast to the manicured lawns of my parents' estate. I was reviewing the preliminary security protocols for the royal delegation's visit, cross-referencing the venue's schematics with the Blackstone Bureau's standard risk assessment models. It was quiet work, precise work. Then the family group chat, innocuously named Snowcroft Sundays, lit up. It started with a message from Aunt Beatrice, the same woman who had struggled to remember Derek's profession just 24 hours earlier. So lovely to see everyone yesterday. Tessa, darling, I spoke to the membership committee chair this morning. Everyone is buzzing about your acceptance. Truly the talk of the town. It was a setup. I knew it. And Tessa knew it. It was the alley-oop pass. Waiting for the slam dunk. Tessa replied 3 minutes later. Thanks, Aunt B. We are thrilled. It is a heavy responsibility, helping steer the club's future. But Richard and I are ready. By the way, has anyone checked on Daria today? I watched the screen, my coffee cup hovering halfway to my mouth. Here it comes, the pivot from celebration to concern, the weaponization of empathy. Why is something wrong, my mother typed. Her typing bubble appeared and disappeared 3 times, indicating her anxiety. I am just worried, Tessa wrote. After that outburst at brunch, I know Daria feels left behind. I hope she's not letting her imagination run away with her. I did some research on these royal delegations. Sometimes spam emails can look very convincing. I would hate for her to show up at the gates and be turned away. It would be so embarrassing for the family. She was good. I had to give her that. She wasn't attacking my credibility directly. She was framing me as a victim of my own delusion. She was painting a picture of a sad, desperate younger sister who had concocted a fantasy to cope with her sibling's success. I did not reply. Derek walked in, carrying a basket of laundry. He glanced at my phone, which was vibrating again. Let me guess, he said, his voice rough with sleep. The Empire Strikes Back. She is seeding the narrative, I said, not looking up. She is telling the family I am mentally unstable or the victim of a phishing scam. Derek set the basket down. Let me send the link to the official press release. It is on the consulate's website. One link, Daria. It shuts them up instantly. No, I said. Why not? They are dragging you. Because if I respond, I am playing her game. I told him, turning my chair to face the window. Tessa fights with noise. She wants a reaction. She wants me to scream, to defend myself, to post screenshots. If I do that, it becomes a family squabble. It becomes, he said, she said. I need to remain a ghost. Ghosts are terrifying because you cannot argue with them. Derek sighed, picking up a towel and folding it with aggressive precision. You have more restraint than I do. If Richard makes one crack about my site management, I'm going to site manage his teeth. Patience. I said, the truth is coming. We just have to let it arrive on its own schedule. But Tessa was not content with just the family chat. By noon, the second front opened. My work phone rang. It was a local number, one I recognized. It was the Stonegate Harbor Events Office. Mrs. Ashfield. The voice on the other end was tentative. It was Sarah, a young coordinator I had helped 2 years ago when a vendor tried to double bill the club for a charity auction. She knew me not as the quiet sister, but as the woman who could spot a padded invoice from 50 yards away. Hello. Sarah, I said, how is the gala preparation coming along? It is frantic, she admitted. She lowered her voice. Listen, Daria, I probably shouldn't be making this call, but I thought you should know. Your sister came by the office this morning. I leaned back in my chair. Did she? Yes. She came in to pick up her welcome packet. But she spent 20 minutes in the director's office. She was asking to see the guest list for the royal reception. She said she wanted to verify that your name was on it. And what did the director tell her? He told her the guest list is sealed by the State Department and the Royal Security Team. We do not even have access to the full list. Only the reception check-in. But Daria, she didn't stop there. Sarah paused. I could hear the hesitation, the discomfort of a nice person being forced to relay something ugly. Go on. Sarah, she told the director that if you were on the list, there must be some mistake. She said Sarah took a breath. She said that the delegation probably has a diversity quota to fill, that they needed someone from the lower-income service sector to make the event look inclusive, and that you were probably a diversity pick. She suggested we double-check your security clearance because she was worried you might make a scene to get attention. The silence in my office was absolute. A diversity quota, a lower-income service sector pick. It was so insulting, so classist, and so undeniably Tessa that it almost made me laugh. She couldn't conceive of a world where I earned my spot. In her universe, merit was tied to net worth. If I was there, and I wasn't rich, I must be a token. Thank you for telling me. Sarah, I said, my voice remained even, though my grip on the phone was tight enough to whiten my knuckles. I just thought it was awful. Sarah whispered, I know what you do. Daria, I remember how you fixed those contracts. I told the director that you were the most competent person I know. But well, she is a full voting member now. Her voice carries weight. Do not worry about it. Sarah, just do your job. I will see you at the gala. I hung up. Derek was standing in the doorway. He had heard the last part. His face was dark. She tried to get you barred, he asked. She tried to flag me as a security risk. I corrected. She is trying to proactively destroy my credibility so that even if I do speak, everyone in that room will view me as the crazy sister who got in on a pity invite. That is it, Derek growled, reaching for his phone. I am calling Richard. I am going to tell him exactly Derek. Stop. Daria, this is war. She is messing with your professional reputation. She is digging her own grave, I snapped, my voice finally rising. Don't you see? She is creating a paper trail of interference. She is on record now, trying to manipulate a State Department-sanctioned event. Let her put her fingerprints on the murder weapon. I turned back to my computer. I need to make a call, a real call, not to the country club, but to the people who actually matter. I opened my encrypted email client. I found the contact for the Royal Delegation's advance team. The liaison was a man named Arthur Sterling, a career diplomat who viewed social pleasantries as an inefficient use of oxygen. I dialed the secure line. Sterling. The voice answered on the first ring. Crisp, British, impatient. Mr. Sterling, this is Daria Snowcroft, Blackstone Bureau. ID number 497 Alpha, Miss Snowcroft. His tone softened imperceptibly. We were just reviewing your slide deck for the address. The section on shell companies in the hospitality sector is particularly illuminating. The Crown is very interested. I am glad to hear it. I said, I am calling regarding a security matter. I have reason to believe there may be local interference regarding the guest list. A family member of mine has been attempting to access the manifest through the venue staff. We are aware, Sterling said. I blinked. UR Stonegate Harbor is a sieve. Ms. Snowcroft. We have monitoring on all communications regarding the event. We logged a query from a Mrs. Tessa Calloway at 10:45 this morning. We also noted her comments regarding your suitability. I apologize. I said, feeling a flush of professional embarrassment. She is irrelevant. Sterling cut in. However, her agitation is noted. It actually aligns with our intelligence. When the rats start squeaking, it usually means they smell the trap. I paused. The trap. Sterling hesitated. There was a clicking sound on the line, likely a recording verification. Ms. Snowcroft, you are cleared for Level 4 intelligence. Correct us. Since the Brussels inquiry. Very well. I am going to send a document to your secure terminal. It is the unredacted guest list for the gala. The persons of interest file. I think you will find it clarifying. A moment later, a notification pinged on my screen. File received RD, underscore gala underscore guest list underscore flagged underscore V 4.pdf. Opened it. It was a spreadsheet. Hundreds of names. The elite of Massachusetts. The wealthy, the powerful, the influential. But some names were highlighted in red. I scrolled down. I saw the names of local politicians. I saw the names of real estate developers. And then, near the bottom of the first page, under the section labeled Top-Tier Donors / Scrutiny Required, I saw it, Callaway, Richard, affiliation Stonegate Harbor voting member / managing partner. Callaway Associates, flag reason, pattern of structured deposits exceeding $10,000 via charitable intermediaries. Potential link to the Ocean View Dark Money Network. My breath caught in my throat. I wasn't just looking at a guest list, I was looking at a target list. Do you see it? Sterling asked. Richard Callaway? I whispered. My brother-in-law. Indeed, Sterling said. Our intelligence suggests that the Stonegate Harbor Country Club has become a washing machine for several boutique investment firms. They use the renovation funds and the gala auctions to move capital that otherwise couldn't be explained. Mr. Callaway has been very generous lately. The $50,000, the money he paid to get Tessa off the wait list, it wasn't just a bribe, it was a placement. He needed that membership not just for Tessa's ego, but because the club was the conduit, the membership was the cover charge for the laundromat. Does he know, I asked? Does he know why you are really coming? No, Sterling said. They think we are coming for champagne and photos. They think the royal delegation is a petting zoo for the rich. They have no idea that the integrity partnership you are presenting is actually the launch of a joint task force to seize assets. I stared at the name in red. Richard Callaway. Suddenly, Tessa's desperate need to get into the club, her frantic attempts to block me, her obsession with status, it all took on a darker, more sinister shape. She was not just a snob. She was the wife of a man who was using her social climbing as a shield for financial crimes. And she probably didn't even know, or maybe she did, and she just chose not to look at the math. As long as the check cleared. Mr. Sterling, I said, my voice steadying. The address I am giving, the examples I am using, we want you to keep them. Sterling said, in fact, we want you to sharpen them. We cannot indict anyone at the gala. Obviously, that is for the courts, but we want to rattle the cage. We want to see who runs. We want you to stand on that stage and explain exactly how the trick works. While the people doing the trick are sitting in the front row, you are using me as bait. I said, it wasn't an accusation, it was a statement of fact. We are using your expertise, Sterling corrected. But yes, your presence there, as a known auditor, is the catalyst. When they realize you are not there to serve drinks, but to serve notice, we expect the chatter on the wiretaps to increase significantly. I looked at the phone. I looked at the group chat, where my aunt was now posting emojis of praying hands, hoping for my mental recovery. They thought I was the weak link. They thought I was the poor relation, the embarrassment. They had no idea that I was the only person in the family who wasn't walking into a firing squad. I understand, I said to Sterling. I will not change a word of the speech. Good. See you on Saturday. Ms. Snowcroft? The line went dead. I sat there for a long time. The silence of the room felt different now. It wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, charged with the static electricity of a coming storm. Derek came back into the room. He saw my face. He saw the way I was staring at the blank screen. What happened? He asked. Did you get the schedule? I got more than the schedule. I said. I turned to him. Tessa is right about one thing. I am a diversity pick. Derek frowned. What, I am the only person in that room who isn't a suspect? I said. I explained it to him. I told him about the red list. I told him about Richard. Derek listened, his face hardening. He didn't look surprised. Not really. He had seen enough disaster zones to know that where there is a lot of money and very little oversight, there is always rot. So, Derek said, leaning against the desk, the royal invitation. It is a sting. It is a trap. I agreed. and Tessa just bought a front row seat for her husband to walk right into it. I looked at my phone again. Another message from Tessa. Daria, please just let us know you are okay. We can help you find a therapist. There is no shame in admitting you are overwhelmed. I picked up the phone. I didn't type a defense. I didn't type an explanation. I typed 4 words. I am ready. See you there. I hit send. Let them think I was crazy. Let them think I was broken. It would only make the moment when the steel jaws of the trap snapped shut that much more devastating. I wasn't going to the gala to ruin Tessa's night. I was going to the gala to do my job. And if my job happened to involve dismantling the criminal enterprise my brother-in-law was funding well, that was just a bonus of the public sector. The petite humiliation of the brunch was gone. We were in the big leagues now, and in the big leagues. You don't throw wine, you throw indictments. The silence in our living room was no longer peaceful. It was heavy, like the air before a tornado touches down. The file from Arthur Sterling was closed on my laptop screen, but the red text highlighting Richard's name seemed to burn through the monitor. Derek was standing by the window, looking out at the marsh. He held a glass of bourbon, but he wasn't drinking it. He was just holding it, feeling the weight of the glass, the way he used to hold a radio during a crisis. You know, Derek said, his voice low and devoid of the sarcasm he usually reserved for my family. When I was in Louisiana, after the floods in 2016, we had a warehouse problem. I looked up. I knew this tone. It was the tone of the man who had seen things that made him wake up sweating in the middle of the night. We had 3 trucks full of generators, Derek continued, turning to face me. They were supposed to go to the nursing homes in the parish. The power had been out for 4 days. It was 90 degrees. Old people were dying of heat stroke. Daria, dying in their beds. He took a sip of the bourbon, his eyes hard. The trucks never arrived. When we tracked the paperwork, the shipping manifest led back to a shell company in Miami. The generators had been diverted, sold off at a markup to private buyers in the next county. The guy who signed the order, he was a pillar of the community, sat on 3 charity boards, donated to the local symphony. He made $40,000 on that deal while grandmothers were suffocating. He set the glass down on the coaster with a sharp click. That is what money laundering looks like, Daria. It is not just numbers on a spreadsheet. It is not just Richard moving decimal points around to save on taxes. It is theft. It is taking resources from people who are drowning and using it to buy a new boat. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty window. I had always looked at my work as a puzzle, a series of logic gates and mathematical discrepancies. I caught the bad guys because they were sloppy with their math. But Derek saw the human cost. He saw the missing blankets, the hollowed-out pension funds, the bridges that collapsed because the cement was cut with sand to save a nickel. You think Richard is involved in something that physical? I asked. I do not know, Derek said. But men like Richard do not care where the money comes from, as long as it is clean when it hits their account. If he is washing money for the Ocean View Network, he is cleaning cash for people who traffic in misery. He walked over to the sofa and sat down next to me. The leather creaked. He took my hand, his palm rough and warm. If we do this, he said, looking me in the eye, if you go up on that stage and expose this mechanism, it is not going to just be an awkward Thanksgiving. It could destroy them. Tessa, your parents. They live on that money. They breathe it. I know, I whispered. That is why I feel sick. Do not feel sick, Derek said firmly. Feel responsible. You did not build the bomb. Daria, you just found it ticking under the floorboards. The question is, do you let it explode on the community, or do you diffuse it? I pulled my hand away and rubbed my temples. I do not want to be the one who burns the family down. Derek, I do not want my legacy to be the sister who sent her brother-in-law to prison out of spite. If I do this, it has to be because it is right, not because Tessa was mean to me at brunch. Exactly, Derek said. That is the rule. No traps, no setups. We do not bait Richard. We do not goad him. We do not hint at what you know. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. We let the law speak. We let the data speak. You go to that gala. You shake his hand. You smile at Tessa. And then you get on that stage and you tell the truth. If Richard is innocent, he has nothing to fear from a speech about integrity. If he is guilty, then he built his own trap. Fight with facts, not feelings, I said, repeating the mantra of the Blackstone Bureau. Right, Derek nodded. Do not fight with your sister at the dinner table. Fight her in the public record. I opened my laptop again. The screen flared to life. I need to be sure, I said. Sterling gave me the flag, but I need to see the pattern myself. I need to see the mechanism. For the next 4 hours, the house was silent, except for the clicking of my keyboard and the occasional rustle of Derek turning a page in his book. He stayed up with me, a silent sentry, while I dove into the deep, murky waters of public financial filings. I started with the Stonegate Harbor Country Club's tax filings, the Form 990 that all nonprofits must file. Then I cross-referenced them with the Callaway Family Foundation, a small charitable entity Richard had set up 3 years ago. It was tedious work. It was looking for a needle in a stack of needles. But then, around 2 a.m, I saw it. Here, I said softly. Derek was at my side in an instant. Look at the dates, I said, pointing to the screen. October 12th, 2024. The Callaway Foundation receives a donation of $100,000 from an anonymous donor via a trust in Delaware. Okay, Derek said. Standard privacy. 2 days later, I slid my finger across the screen. October 14th, the Callaway Foundation donates $95,000 to the Stonegate Historical Preservation Fund, a sub-account of the country club. And then, I opened a third window, a cached news article from a construction trade journal. October 20th, Stonegate Harbor awards a $90,000 contract for landscape renovation to Greenscapes Limited. Let me guess, Derek said grimly. Greenscapes is a shell. I am running the corporate registry now, I said, typing furiously. Greenscapes lists its registered agent at a P.O. box in Nevada. Same P.O. box as the Delaware Trust that sent the original money. I sat back, the breath leaving my lungs in a rush. It was a round-trip ticket. The money started in the dark, went through Richard's foundation to look like charity, went to the club to look like a civic project, and then went right back out to the original owners as a legitimate business payment. Richard kept 5% as a management fee, and the club got a cut for being the pass-through. And the best part, Richard got a tax deduction for the donation. He is not just laundering money, I said, feeling a mix of awe and disgust. He is getting a tax write-off for doing it. And buying status, Derek added. That $95,000 probably got him a plaque on the clubhouse wall. It got him the Patron of the Arts award that year, I recalled. Tessa wore a red dress to the ceremony. She posted about it for weeks. The pieces were locking together with the terrifying precision of a rifle bolt. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a clerical error. This was a business model. And my sister's entire social standing was built on the back of a washing machine. My phone rang. It was late, nearly 3 a.m. I looked at the caller ID. It was Director Vance, my immediate superior at Blackstone. I answered on the first ring. Director, I know it is late. Snowcroft. Vance's voice was gravelly, sounding like he had been smoking cigars for 40 years. I just got off a secure video conference with the Royal Delegation's security chief. Is everything okay? I asked. They are nervous, Vance said. The chatter is picking up. They know we are looking at Stonegate. They do not know who the asset is yet, but they know someone is inside the perimeter. I am ready, I said. Are you? Vance asked. Sterling tells me your brother-in-law is a person of interest. That is a conflict of interest. Daria, usually, I would pull an agent off a case like this. Do not pull me, I said quickly. I know the terrain. I know the players. If you send a stranger in there, they will close ranks. I am the harmless little sister. I am the blind spot. Vance was silent for a long moment. I could hear him tapping a pen against his desk. "You are walking a razor's wire," Vance said finally. "The speech you are giving it has to be perfect. You cannot name names. You cannot libel anyone. You have to describe the crime so perfectly that the criminal recognizes himself. But the lawyers cannot sue us. It has to be a ghost story. Daria, scary, but you cannot touch it." "I understand," I said. "And Daria." "Yes, sir. If you hesitate, if you flinch because that is your family out there, the delegation will hang you out to dry. We do not protect agents who get sentimental." "I will not flinch," I said. The line went dead. I looked at Derek. He had heard enough to know the score. "Get some sleep," he said. "You have a speech to write." "I cannot sleep," I said. "I have to write it now, while the anger is fresh, while the numbers are still swimming in my head." Derek kissed the top of my head and went upstairs. I stayed in the dark, the blue light of the screen my only company. I opened a blank document. I didn't start with "Ladies and Gentlemen." I didn't start with a joke. I typed the title, "The Cost of Silence: How We Laundered Our Conscience." I began to write. I wrote about the flood in Louisiana, though I didn't name the state. I wrote about the generators that never arrived. I wrote about the hospitals that collapsed in earthquakes because the rebar was cheap. And then I pivoted. I wrote about the mechanism. We like to think crime happens in dark alleys. I typed, "But the most dangerous crimes happen under crystal chandeliers. They happen in boardrooms where good men look the other way, because the donation is too large to question. They happen when we decide that a gold membership card is worth more than the integrity of our ledger." I described the Historical Preservation Fund scheme without naming it. I described the round-trip transaction. I used the exact percentages I had seen in Richard's filings: 5% for the foundation, 10% for the venue. It was a code. To the audience, it would sound like a hypothetical example of financial fraud. But to Richard, it would sound like I was reading his diary. I wrote until the sun came up, turning the marsh outside my window from black to a soft, hazy gray. By the time I typed the final period, I felt empty. I had poured every ounce of my frustration, my disappointment, and my professional rage into those 3,000 words. I wasn't going to scream at Tessa. I wasn't going to throw a drink at Richard. I was going to stand on a podium, backed by the seal of the royal delegation, and I was going to hold up a mirror. And if they looked into that mirror and saw monsters looking back, that wasn't my fault. I was just the one cleaning the glass. Dinner at my parents' house was usually a performance art piece titled, "Everything is Fine." We would sit around the mahogany table, passing bowls of roast potatoes and pretending that our entire emotional ecosystem wasn't built on a foundation of passive-aggressive comments and status anxiety. But this Tuesday was different. The air in the dining room was thick, not with the usual judgment, but with a terrifying, suffocating curiosity. Since the news of the royal invitation had solidified, and since my father's late-night internet deep dive into the Blackstone Bureau archives, the dynamic had shifted. I was no longer Daria the Invisible. I was Daria the Asset. My mother was the first to break the silence. She didn't ask about the audit. She didn't ask about the long nights I spent decoding spreadsheets or the threats I received from corrupt contractors. That was the work. And the work was messy. She wanted the shine. "So," she said, cutting a piece of chicken with delicate precision, "this delegation, the Duke of Kensington is leading it. Correct, I read in Tatler that he is quite charming." "He is the head of the delegation, yes," I said, keeping my eyes on my plate. "And will you speak to him?" Mother asked. Her eyes were wide, hungry. "I mean, privately, or is it just a speech to the room?" "It is a working reception, Mother," I explained, trying to keep the exhaustion out of my voice. "We are discussing policy. I imagine there will be a receiving line. But we are not going to be exchanging recipes. But you will be introduced," she pressed. "As the keynote speaker, that implies a level of intimacy." She let the word hang there. Intimacy. What she meant was access. She was trying to calculate how much of my sudden elevation she could siphon off for herself if I shook the Duke's hand, and she touched my hand. Did that make her royalty by association? "I am not a ticket, Mom," I said quietly. She blinked, feigning innocence. "I never said you were. I am just proud. Is a mother not allowed to be interested in her daughter's success?" "You are interested in the title," I said. "You were not interested when I indicted the city councilman last year. You were not interested when I recovered $4 million for the teacher's pension fund. Well, that is all so technical." She waved a hand. "This is history. Daria, this is the monarchy." Across the table, my cousin Julian was watching me. Julian was 28, a sharp-eyed analyst for a hedge fund in Boston. He was the only one in the family who didn't look at money as magic. He looked at it as physics. He had been silent for most of the meal, scrolling on his phone under the table. "I read the brief," Julian said suddenly. The table went quiet. Tessa, who had been pushing her salad around her plate like it was toxic waste, looked up. "What brief?" Tessa asked. "The abstract for Daria's presentation." Julian said. He looked at me with a new expression. It wasn't affection, exactly. It was respect. The kind of respect one shark gives another when they realize they hunt in the same waters. "You are not just giving a speech, Daria. You are proposing a structural change to the way charitable trusts are audited in the Commonwealth." He tapped his phone screen. "I looked up the Blackstone Bureau's clearance ratings." Julian continued. "You are level 4. That is higher than the clearance for most congressional aides. You are not doing community service, are you? You are building the cage." I looked at Julian. For the first time in my life, a blood relative actually saw me. He didn't see the shy sister. He saw the architect. "Someone has to build it," I said. "And you are good at it," Julian nodded. "I saw the breakdown of that shell company network you dismantled in 2023, the way you tracked the IP addresses through the vendor portal. That was elegant, brutal, but elegant. Thank you, Julian," I said. Tessa made a noise in her throat. A sharp, discordant sound. She couldn't stand it. She couldn't stand that Julian, the family's golden boy of finance, was praising me for my intellect while she was sitting there with nothing but a country club membership that was currently under federal scrutiny. "Yes, well," Tessa said, her voice tight. "It is all very impressive, I am sure, but we are family. We should be supporting each other, not just analyzing each other." She turned to me. Her eyes were glassy, shimmering with a mix of fear and calculation. This was the pivot. The attack in the group chat hadn't worked. The attempt to block me at the venue hadn't worked. Now she was going to try the oldest trick in the Snowcroft playbook, the guilt trip. "Daria," Tessa said softly, "I owe you an apology." I stopped eating. I waited. "I was jealous," she admitted. It sounded like the words were being pulled out of her with pliers. "I have worked so hard for this membership, 10 years, and when you showed that invitation, I just felt eclipsed. It was petty of me. I'm sorry." It was a good performance. If I hadn't spent the last 48 hours analyzing her husband's fraudulent tax returns, I might have believed her. "Thank you, Tessa," I said. "I appreciate that." "I just want us to be close again," she said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. Her skin was cold. "I want to be proud of you. I am proud of you. In fact," here it comes, the hook. "I was thinking," Tessa said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Since you are speaking about, integrity and community, maybe you could mention the family. Just a small nod, something about how your sister's dedication to the Stonegate Harbor community inspired you to look closer at how these institutions work." I stared at her. The audacity was breathtaking. She wanted me to frame her vanity project as my inspiration. She wanted to attach her name to my work, so that when the royal delegation heard Snowcroft, they would think of Callaway as well. She wanted to sanitize her reputation with my bleach. "You want me to name-drop you?" I asked flatly. "Not name-drop." Tessa laughed nervously. "Just acknowledge the connection. It would mean so much to the club board. They are so excited that a local girl is speaking. If you could just mention that your sister is a full voting member, it would really solidify my standing. It would show that we are a power family, a dynasty. She squeezed my hand. Please. Daria, for me. It is just one sentence. It would make everything I have worked for valid. I looked at her hand on mine. I looked at Richard, who was sweating slightly despite the air conditioning. He knew. He had to know that having his name spoken on that stage was not a blessing, it was a curse. But Tessa didn't know. She was still trying to climb the ladder, unaware that the ladder was on fire. I gently pulled my hand away. No, I said. Tessa's smile faltered. What? I cannot do that, Tessa, I said. My speech is not a toast at a wedding. It is a forensic analysis of financial malpractice. If I mention you, or the club, or Richard, it will not be in the context you want. But, Tessa stammered, but you are my sister. You can soften it. You can spin it. I do not spin, I said. I verify. You are being selfish, Mother interjected, slamming her fork down. The veneer of polite interest shattered. Your sister is asking for one small favor. One tiny acknowledgement after all she has done for this family. She is the one who hosts Christmas. She is the one who organizes the anniversary parties, and you cannot spare 3 words to help her social standing. Her social standing is not my job. Mother, I said, my voice rising just enough to cut through her hysteria. And frankly, if she knew what I was actually going to talk about, she would be begging me not to mention her name. What is that supposed to mean? Tessa snapped. Are you threatening me? I am protecting you. I shot back. I am refusing to drag you into a federal inquiry by association, but you are too obsessed with your gold card to see that I am doing you the biggest favor of your life by keeping your name out of my mouth. Mother burst into tears. It was a practiced, theatrical weeping, designed to bring all conversation to a halt and center the emotional gravity of the room on her. I do not understand, she wailed into her napkin. Why does everything have to be a fight? Why can we not just be a nice, normal family where everyone helps everyone? We are Snowcrofts. We are supposed to rise together, but you, Daria, you just want to punish us. You want to stand up there with your royals and look down on us. Derek stood up. He didn't slam the table. He didn't shout. He simply rose to his full height, 6'2" of calm, immovable resolve. He placed his napkin on the table. We are leaving, Derek said. Derek, sit down, Father barked. We are not finished. We are, Derek said. He looked at my father, then at Richard. Daria is not a public relations firm for this family. She is a federal auditor. She has a job to do, and she is not going to compromise her ethics to help Tessa win a popularity contest at a golf course. He walked around the table and put his hand on my shoulder. Come on, Daria. I stood up. My legs felt shaky, but Derek's grip was steady. I looked at my mother, who was sobbing into her hands. I looked at Tessa, whose face was twisted in a mask of ugly, naked entitlement. I am sorry you feel that way, Mom, I said, but I am not selling my speech to buy the peace. We walked toward the hallway. I felt a profound sense of loss. Not because I was losing them, I had lost them a long time ago, but because I finally realized that they were incapable of loving me for anything other than what I could provide. Daria. Wait. It was my father. I stopped at the front door. Derek opened it, letting the cool night air flow into the stifling house. But he waited for me. Father walked down the hallway. He looked older under the harsh light of the foyer chandelier. He looked tired. He wasn't looking at me with the usual critical squint he used to assess my outfits or my career choices. He was looking at me with something else. Confusion, regret. He reached into the back pocket of his trousers and pulled out his wallet. It was an old leather thing, bulging with receipts and cards. He opened it. His fingers, slightly arthritic, fumbled for a moment before pulling out a piece of paper. It was folded into a small square, the edges worn and soft as fabric. He unfolded it. It was a clipping from the Marowak Gazette. It was 3 years old. The headline was barely legible at the crease, but the photo was clear. It was me, standing on the steps of City Hall, pointing at a chart during a press conference about the housing fraud investigation. I stared at it. "Dad, I saw this when it came out," he said, his voice gruff, avoiding eye contact. I cut it out. I did not understand half of what the article said. It was all acronyms and legal codes. "But you looked sure." He looked up at me then. "You looked sure of yourself," he repeated. "I always worried about you. Daria, you were so quiet. You never fought for the biggest piece of cake. I thought you were weak. I thought you would get eaten alive by the world." He smoothed the paper with his thumb. "But you are the one doing the eating, aren't you?" My throat tightened. "I just want things to be fair, Dad." "Fair," he chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "We never taught you that. I do not know where you got it from. But we never taught you fair." He handed the clipping to me, then pulled it back. He folded it up again, carefully, following the original creases, and tucked it back into his wallet, right behind his driver's license. "You do what you have to do on Saturday," he said. "Do not mention Tessa. Do not mention us. You go up there, and you be whatever this is." He tapped his chest, over the wallet. "Dad," I whispered. "Richard is in trouble, real trouble." Father looked at me. His eyes were hard, but clear. "I know," he said. "I ran the numbers too. Daria, I am a snob, but I am not an idiot. I saw the donation dates. And you are not going to warn him." Father looked back toward the dining room, where Richard was pouring himself another glass of wine, and Tessa was frantically texting on her phone. "Richard is a grown man," Father said, "and Tessa wanted the view from the top. She never asked what was holding the building up." He stepped back. "Good night, Daria. Drive safe." "Good night, Dad." I walked out to the car where Derek was waiting with the engine running. I got in and closed the door, sealing us inside the quiet safety of the vehicle. "You okay?" Derek asked, putting the car in gear. "Yeah," I said, looking back at the house. The lights were still on. The performance was continuing inside, but for the first time, the audience had walked out. "My dad kept the article," I said. "The one about the housing audit. He carries it in his wallet." Derek smiled, a small, sad smile in the dashboard light. "People are complicated. Daria, even the ones who hurt us." "He knows," I said. "He knows Richard is dirty, and he is letting it happen." "Maybe that is his version of an apology," Derek said. "He is stepping out of your way." I leaned my head against the cool glass of the window. "Revenge is not burning the house down, is it?" I murmured, watching the trees blur past. "No," Derek said. "What is it?" "It is turning on the lights," I said, "and forcing them to see the mess they have been living in." I closed my eyes. I had the speech. I had the data. And now, strangely, I had the permission. Not that I needed it, but it felt lighter to carry the sword knowing that at least one person in that house wouldn't hate me for swinging it. Or maybe he would. Maybe he just wanted to be on the winning side for once. Either way, Saturday was coming, and the monsters under the bed were about to be dragged out into the daylight. Thursday morning arrived with the frantic energy of a stock market crash. The gala was 48 hours away, and the air around Marowak felt tight, as if the entire town was holding its breath. I was sitting in my home office, reviewing the final draft of my speech for the third time, when my laptop emitted a sharp, dissonant chime. It was not a standard email notification. It was a security flag from the Blackstone Bureau's internal server. A red banner flashed across the top of my screen, "Authentication failure. Invalid change request detected." I frowned, clicking on the alert. My heart rate remained steady, a byproduct of years spent in high-pressure audits, but my mind instantly shifted into defensive gear. I had not made any change requests. I had not touched the logistics portal in 2 days. I opened the log. At 8:15 in the morning, an email had been sent to the royal delegation's scheduling office. The sender appeared to be me. The display name was Daria Snowcroft. The signature block was perfect, right down to the font size and the disclaimer about confidentiality. But the email address was wrong. My official address ended in blackstone.gov. This email had come from blackstone-bureau.net. It was a spoof domain, purchased less than 12 hours ago. I read the body of the email. Dear Protocol Officer, due to a sudden and severe family mental health crisis, I must regretfully withdraw from the keynote address scheduled for Saturday. Please accept my deepest apologies. I will be taking a leave of absence effective immediately. Regards, Daria. I stared at the screen. The audacity was so staggering it was almost impressive. Someone had paid for a fake domain, mimicked my syntax, and tried to cancel the biggest professional moment of my life. All under the guise of a mental health crisis. It was the narrative Tessa had started in the group chat. Daria is unstable. Daria is overwhelmed now, weaponized into digital fraud. I did not call my sister. I did not scream. I did not throw my phone. I took a screenshot. I pulled the header metadata, revealing the IP address of the sender. It traced back to a residential connection in Merriwick. Specifically, a connection registered to the Callaway residence. Tessa had not even bothered to use a VPN. She was so accustomed to the world bending to her will that she thought she could lie to the British government and the United States State Department from her own kitchen island while drinking a matcha latte. I opened a new secure channel to Arthur Sterling. Incident report. Attempted impersonation. Priority 1. See attached metadata. No action required on your end regarding the schedule. I am confirmed. But please log this as a hostile interference attempt. I hit send. 10 minutes later, my personal cell phone rang. It was Derek. He was supposed to be at the hardware store picking up supplies for a project, but his voice was tight, clipped. You are not going to believe this, Derek said. Try me, I replied, typing furiously as I cross-referenced the spoofing domain with a registry database. I just got a call from the Stonegate concierge. Derek said, they were calling to confirm our revised RSVP. What revised RSVP? Apparently, I am no longer attending. They said the guest list for the VIP section was over capacity, and since I am not a voting member or a primary invitee, my seat was reassigned to a visiting dignitary. You are listed as attending solo. I stopped typing. The email attack was clumsy, but this was surgical. Tessa knew she could not stop me from showing up. My name was on the marquee, but she could isolate me. She wanted me to walk into that room alone, vulnerable, without my husband beside me. She wanted to strip away my armor. She wanted the narrative to be, look at poor Daria, standing there all by herself while her successful sister holds court with her husband. Did they say who authorized the change? I asked. They said it came from the host committee liaison, Derek said. Guess who is the new chair of the host committee as of yesterday, Tessa? I said, the word tasted like ash. She is trying to cut me out of the herd. Daria, Derek said, she wants you exposed. She is panicked. I said, she knows something is coming, and she is flailing. She thinks if she makes me uncomfortable enough, I will fold. She forgot one thing. Derek said, his voice shifted, becoming the voice of the man who had coordinated logistics for 3 federal disaster zones. I do not need a country club invitation to enter a secure zone. What are you going to do? I am already doing it, Derek said. I am not calling Tessa to beg for my seat back. That is what she wants. She wants the drama. She wants us to plead. I am calling Colonel Holloway, the head of the Royal Protection Detail. We worked together during the flooding in Vermont. Derek said, he owes me a favor for getting his motorcade out of a mudslide. Hang tight. Daria, I will see you inside. He hung up. I sat back in my chair. The silence in the room was heavy, vibrating with the invisible currents of a war being fought on fiber optic cables and cellular networks. Tessa was playing a game of social chess. She was moving pawns: the email, the seating chart, the rumors. She thought she was winning because she had captured a knight. But she didn't realize she was playing against people who didn't look at the board. We looked at the table underneath it. My secure line rang. It was Arthur Sterling. Ms. Snowcroft, Sterling said. His voice was no longer the polite, diplomatic drawl of our previous conversations. It was cold, sharp, and utterly devoid of humor. We received your incident report regarding the spoofed email. I apologize for the disturbance. I said, I am handling the family aspect of it. The family aspect is no longer the primary concern. Sterling interrupted. We ran the trace on the IP address you provided. It matches the location of a person of interest on our financial watch list. Mr. Richard Calloway. Yes, I said, my brother-in-law. And the email attempted to interfere with the schedule of a State Department-sanctioned event. Sterling continued. Under the Diplomatic Relations Act, that is not a prank. Ms. Snowcroft, that is a federal offense. Attempting to impersonate a federal agent to disrupt a foreign delegation, your sister has just escalated this from a domestic dispute to a national security incident. I closed my eyes. Oh, Tessa. She wanted to be important so badly. Now, she was a target. What happens now? I asked. We cannot risk further interference. Sterling said, if they are willing to spoof emails and manipulate guest lists, we are aware of the attempt to remove Mr. Ashfield. By the way, then, we must assume they are willing to escalate further. We cannot have a keynote speaker who is vulnerable to sabotage. My stomach dropped. Are you cutting me? No. Sterling said, we are upgrading you. I blinked. Upgrading as of 5 minutes ago. You are no longer classified as a guest speaker. You are now classified as a protected witness and technical advisor. This means you are officially under the umbrella of the delegation's security protocol. He paused, and I could hear the smile in his voice, a terrifying, wolfish smile. This also means we dictate the terms of your attendance, not the Stonegate Host Committee. We have informed the venue that Mr. Ashfield is reinstated with full clearance. Furthermore, we have informed them that any attempt to alter your seating, your schedule, or your access will be treated as a hostile act against the Crown. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. There is one more thing, Sterling added. Because of the threat level, we are moving your position in the program. You are no longer speaking before dinner. You are speaking during the main course. The Duke wants you at the head table. Seated to his right, he wants to send a very clear message to anyone trying to silence you. I stared at the wall. The head table. The Duke's right hand. Tessa had spent 10 years trying to get a table near the window. I was going to be seated at the epicenter of the event, protected by men with earpieces and guns, solely because Tessa tried to delete me. Thank you. Mr. Sterling, I said, do not thank me. Sterling said, thank your sister. She just gave you the biggest platform in the room. 30 minutes later, my personal phone buzzed. It was Tessa. I let it ring. I watched the name dance on the screen. Tessa's sister. It felt like a relic from a past life. It stopped. Then it rang again immediately. I picked it up. Daria Tessa's voice was high, breathless. It sounded like panic wrapped in silk. Hello? Tessa, I said. I just got a call from the club manager. She stammered. He was shouting. He said the British consulate called him. He said something about security protocols, Daria. What did you do? I did nothing, I said calmly. I sat at my desk and worked. He said, I am not allowed to touch the seating chart anymore, Tessa cried. He said if I try to move you or Derek again, they will revoke the club's charter for the event, Daria. People are looking at me. The manager asked if we were under investigation. Do you know how embarrassing that is? I imagine it is very stressful. I said, and the email, she rushed on, too manic to filter her words. Someone told me that there was a glitch with your email that you canceled. She was fishing. She wanted to know if her little trick had worked, or if she had been caught. There was no glitch. Tessa, I said, there was a crime. Silence. Absolute, terrified silence on the other end of the line. A crime, she whispered. Identity theft involving a federal officer, I said, reciting the statute from memory. Wire fraud. Interference with a diplomatic mission. It is a felony. Tessa. 5 to 10 years in federal prison, depending on the judge. I heard a sharp intake of breath. It was just a joke, she squeaked. It was just Daria. You are so dramatic. It was probably just a prank. You cannot call the police on family. I did not call the police. Tessa. I said, the Royal Security Detail traced the IP address automatically. It is standard procedure for them. They traced it to your house, to your router. Oh my God, she whimpered. Oh my God. Richard will kill me. Daria, you have to stop them. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them I was just trying to help you. I thought you were stressed. I was trying to give you an out. An out. I laughed. A short, sharp sound. You were trying to erase me. I was protecting the family name, she screamed, the facade finally cracking. You are going to go up there and embarrass us with your boring little charts and your cheap suit. You do not belong there. Daria, you are a nobody. I did what I had to do to keep you from ruining my night. Your night, I asked. Yes, my night. This is my club, my world. You are just a guest. I am not a guest anymore. Tessa, I said, my voice dropping to a register that was pure ice. I am the keynote speaker, and because of your little stunt, the delegation has moved me to the head table. I will be sitting next to the Duke. Derek will be sitting next to the Duchess. I heard her choke, a literal, physical gagging sound. No, she whispered, that is impossible. That is my spot. I bid on that spot. You cannot buy this spot. Tessa, I said, you have to earn it. Or, in your case, you have to annoy the British government so much that they put me there just to spite you. You did this, she hissed. You manipulated them. I reacted to a security threat. I said, you wanted to play games. Congratulations. You just played yourself into the nosebleed seats. Daria, please. She switched tracks instantly, the tears starting. Please fix this. Tell them to put me at the table. If you are sitting there and I am at table 42, I will be a laughingstock. Everyone will know. Please, I am your sister. You are my sister. I agreed. But you are also the person who tried to commit wire fraud to shut me up. I am done fixing your messes. Tessa, you wanted to be a power player. Well, welcome to the big leagues. The rules are different here. When you cheat, you do not just get a penalty stroke. You get indicted. You hate me, she sobbed. I do not hate you, I said, and I realized it was true. I pity you. You want to win so badly that you were willing to break the law. You were willing to risk jail just to keep me from shining for 5 minutes. I just wanted to be special, she whispered. You were special. I said, you were my sister. That used to be enough. I hung up the phone. I sat there for a moment, listening to the hum of my computer. The connection to Tessa was severed, but the connection to the truth was stronger than ever. She had tried to bury me. Instead, she had just handed me a shovel. And on Saturday night, I was going to use it to dig up the whole rotten garden. My laptop pinged again. A new email from Sterling. Subject final itinerary. Note. Transport has been arranged. An armored diplomatic vehicle will collect you and Mr. Ashfield at 1800 hours. Please be advised that the motorcade will have a police escort. I smiled. Tessa had wanted a grand entrance. She had wanted the flashing lights and the attention. Well, she was going to get them, but they wouldn't be for her. And the flashing lights might not be the kind she wanted. I closed the laptop. The rehearsal was over. The stage was set, and the curtain was about to rise on the final act of the House of Snowcroft. Friday morning broke over Marwick with the kind of aggressive sunshine that usually precedes a hurricane. The sky was a hard, enamel blue, and the air was crisp, but beneath the surface, the town was vibrating. At 9 o'clock, Stonegate Harbor released the official press statement. It was a masterpiece of pretentious typography on cream-colored digital stock. We are honored to confirm the attendance of His Grace, the Duke of Kensington, and the royal delegation at tomorrow's Gala for Integrity. This historic visit marks a new chapter for our community. The reaction was immediate and visceral. My phone, which I had left on the kitchen counter, began to buzz and slide across the granite surface like a possessed hockey puck. The local news alerts were firing every 30 seconds. The Merriwick community forums were in a state of absolute hysteria. I could practically hear the sound of 300 luxury SUVs revving their engines as the entire social register of the town rushed to their stylists. To them, this was the Super Bowl of status. It was the moment they had all been training for. The goal was simple: get close enough to the Duke to be in the background of a photo that would hang in the hallway for the next 40 years. But inside my house, the mood was different. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in the hallway, wearing sweatpants and an old university t-shirt, holding a hairbrush like a microphone. I was not practicing my curtsy, I was practicing my indictment. Transparency, I said to the reflection, keeping my voice low and level. Transparency is not an act of aggression. It is an act of structural maintenance. When we hide the load-bearing walls of our economy behind shell companies, we do not protect the building, we guarantee its collapse. I paused. I looked at my own eyes in the glass. They looked tired, but they did not look scared. Too aggressive, I asked the empty room. No, Derek's voice came from the kitchen doorway. It is precise, but you need to hit the word collapse harder. Make them feel the debris falling. He walked in, holding a tablet. His face was grim. We have movement, he said. I turned. Tessa Richard, Derek corrected. I have been monitoring the public donor scroll for the gala. You know how they have that digital ticker on the website? The one that updates in real time to shame people into giving more. I know it. Well, 10 minutes ago, a new entry popped up, listed as Anonymous Friend of Stonegate. But I ran the transaction ID through the public blockchain ledger. He held up the tablet. $50,000, Derek said, wired at 8:45 this morning. I stared at the number. $50,000. It was a staggering amount of money to drop on a whim, even for Richard. Why now, I asked. He already bought the table. He already paid the membership fees. He is buying silence, Derek said, or he thinks he is. It is a classic panic move. Daria. I saw it all the time with contractors after a disaster. When they knew the auditors were coming to check the cement quality, suddenly they would make a big donation to the local police fund or the mayor's re-election campaign. They think that if they throw enough money at the problem will get confused and walk away. He thinks if he is the biggest donor in the room, I will be afraid to speak. I realized. He thinks the gold plating on his name tag will deflect the accusations. Exactly, Derek said. He's trying to make himself too expensive to prosecute. I felt a surge of cold anger. It was so arrogant. It was the fundamental belief of men like Richard Calloway that morality was a commodity, something that could be traded on the open market like soybean futures. He just wasted $50,000. I said, more than that. Derek said, scrolling down. He drained the operating account for his consulting firm to do it. That money was supposed to be for payroll next week. He is betting everything on this gala fixing his reputation. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a news alert. It was a secure message on the Signal app. Sender A, Sterling. Update the Duke has reviewed your draft. He requests that you emphasize the section on community complicity. He wants the audience to understand that looking the other way is an active choice. Also, be advised 2 agents from the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network will be in the ballroom, disguised as waitstaff. They are not there to serve hors d'oeuvres. They are there to log reactions. I showed the message to Derek. Waitstaff. Derek mused. I hope Richard tips well. It might be the last time he gets to do it. The trap is set, I whispered, and they are all putting on their tuxedos to walk right into it. Around noon, the inevitable family intervention began. It started with a call from my mother. Her voice was brittle, vibrating with a frequency that could shatter glass. Daria, she said, skipping the hello. I am looking at the seating chart, the revised one. Why are you at the head table? That was a security decision. Mother, I said, keeping my voice neutral. The delegation insisted, but Tessa is at table 12, Mother said, her voice rising. Table 12 is near the kitchen. Daria, It is practically in the service corridor. She is devastated. She has been crying since breakfast. I cannot control the seating. Mom, you can, she insisted. You are the speaker. You can tell them that your family belongs with you. How does it look? Daria. You up there with the Duke, and your sister, a full voting member, sitting next to the ice sculpture. It looks like the delegation values security over social climbing. I said, Daria, please. Mother's voice shifted from anger to begging. Just this once. Do not make a scene. Do not make this about whatever grudge you are holding. Just let us have a nice night. We bought new dresses. Dad rented a tuxedo. We just want to be proud of you. Can you not just give a nice normal speech about charity and let us take some photos? I'm going to give a speech about charity. I said, I promise you that. But not that kind of speech. She pressed. Tessa said you might say things that are controversial. She said you might try to embarrass Richard. If Richard is embarrassed by the truth, that is his problem, not mine. I said, he just donated $50,000, Mother cried. He is a pillar of this club. You cannot just attack him. I am not attacking anyone who has not invited it. I said, I have to go. Mom, I have to rehearse. I hung up. My hand was shaking slightly. It wasn't fear. It was the sheer exhaustion of having to defend my integrity to the people who should have been the first to champion it. 2 hours later, a car pulled into my driveway. It was a white Range Rover, Tessa's car. I watched from the window as she got out. She wasn't wearing her usual armor of designer sunglasses and sharp heels. She was wearing leggings and a sweater. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. She walked to the door and knocked. It wasn't the imperious rap of a queen. It was a hesitant tap. I opened the door. Can I come in? She asked. Her voice was raspy. I stepped aside. She walked into the living room and sat down on the edge of the sofa, clutching her purse like a shield. She looked around the room, taking in the simple furniture, the lack of pretension. It was a stark contrast to her own home, which was curated to look like a magazine spread. I know you know about the email, she said, looking at the floor. I do. I said. I remained standing. I panicked. She said, I know that is not an excuse, but Daria, you have to understand. This membership, it is all I have. She looked up at me then, and for the first time in years, I saw the sister I remembered from childhood, the one who used to be afraid of thunderstorms. Richard never talks to me, she confessed. The words tumbled out. He is always working. He is always managing assets. I do not know what he does. I honestly do not. I just know that the money appears, and I'm supposed to spend it to make us look good. The club was the one thing that was mine. It was my project, my status. Tears began to spill down her cheeks. Not the theatrical tears she used at brunch. These were ugly. Messy tears. If you go up there and humiliate us, if you make us look like criminals, I lose everything. Daria, the friends I made. They will drop me. The board. They will ban me. I will be nobody again. I will just be the wife of a guy who did something wrong. She took a shuddering breath. I am scared, she whispered. I am terrified that I have built my whole life on sand, and you are about to bring the tide in. I felt a crack in my armor. Seeing her like this, stripped of her vanity, terrified of her own irrelevance, it was heartbreaking. She wasn't a villain. She was a victim of her own hollow ambition. She had tied her self-worth to a man who was using her as a human shield for his laundering operation. I walked over and sat down on the coffee table in front of her. Tessa, I said softly, I am not doing this to hurt you. I am doing this because what Richard is doing, it hurts real people. It is not just numbers. It is stolen money. I know. She sniffled. Deep down, I think I know. But can we not just deal with it privately? Can you not just tell him to stop? Why does it have to be in front of the Duke? Why does it have to be the end of the world because he made it public? I said, he used the club. He used the charity. He made the community part of his lie. The truth has to be as loud as the lie was. Tessa reached out and took my hand. Her grip was desperate. I am sorry, she said. I am sorry for the brunch. I am sorry for the email. I am sorry I treated you like you were small. You are not small. Daria, you are terrifyingly big. Please, just have mercy. I looked at her. I really looked at her. And I almost gave in. I almost said, okay, I will tone it down. I will make it abstract. I will save your face. My phone buzzed on the table next to us. It was facing up. A message notification appeared. It was from Tessa. I frowned. Tessa was sitting right in front of me. Her phone was in her hand. She must have scheduled the text, or maybe she had drafted it in the car and forgot to send it until the signal caught up. I looked at the screen. Tessa. I am going to go over there and cry. It usually works on her. If she agrees to change the speech, call the lawyer and tell him we might not need the injunction. The air in the room froze. I read it again. Call the lawyer. Injunction. Cry? It usually works. She wasn't confessing. She was executing a play. I looked up at my sister. Her eyes were still wet. Her expression was a masterpiece of vulnerability. She was waiting for me to hug her. She was waiting for me to promise that everything would be okay. She didn't know I had seen the screen. I stood up slowly. The sympathy I had felt 5 seconds ago evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard clarity that felt like steel in my spine. You are right, Tessa, I said. My voice was very quiet. She brightened. Just a fraction. You are terrified of being a nobody. I said, and you should be. I picked up my phone and turned the screen toward her. You sent this to the wrong person. I said, I think you meant to send this to Richard. Tessa's eyes went to the screen. She read the text. The color drained from her face so fast she looked like a corpse. Daria. I get out. I said, no, wait, I can explain. Get out, I shouted. It was the first time I had raised my voice in 10 years. The sound bounced off the walls, raw and furious. Get out of my house. Take your fake tears and your scheduled texts and get out. Tessa scrambled up, clutching her purse. She looked at me with pure panic now. The mask was gone, and underneath, there was no sister left. There was only a desperate, clawing creature trying to survive. You cannot say the word money laundering, she shrieked, backing toward the door. I need you not to say it. If you say it, the bank freezes our accounts on Monday. Daria, please. We have a mortgage. You should have thought about the mortgage before you bought the membership, I yelled back. She fled. I heard the front door slam, then the roar of the Range Rover's engine as she peeled out of the driveway. I stood in the silence of my living room. My heart was pounding, but my head was clear. Derek walked in from the back deck. He had been listening. He didn't say anything. He just walked over and put his arms around me. She almost had me. I whispered into his chest. I almost felt bad for her. That is what they do, Derek said. They use your goodness against you. They think empathy is a weakness they can exploit. She is not sorry, I said, pulling away and wiping my eyes. She just wanted to edit the script. She wanted to keep the stage. Derek agreed. She does not care if the play is a tragedy, as long as she gets to take a bow. I walked back to my laptop. I opened the speech. I scrolled to the section on the enablers. I had written it as a general observation about society. I highlighted the paragraph. I hit delete. Then I started typing. I made it sharper. I made it personal. I didn't use her name, but I described the mechanism of the willing accomplice, the spouse who enjoys the fruit of the poisonous tree while pretending not to see the roots. Are you changing it? Derek asked. I am refining it. I said, she wanted me not to use the word money laundering. Fine. I typed the new sentence. We call it laundering because it sounds clean. It sounds like a chore, but let us call it what it really is. The monetization of silence. I looked at Derek. I'm not going to say laundering. I said, I am going to say theft. I am going to say fraud. And I'm going to make sure that when I say it, I am looking right at table 12. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the room. The gala was tomorrow. The dress rehearsal was over. The time for mercy had passed. Tomorrow, we would dine with kings, and tomorrow, the house of Snowcroft would fall. The air inside the Stonegate Harbor Ballroom did not smell like the ocean. Despite the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Atlantic, it smelled of ozone, expensive hairspray, and the sharp, metallic tang of adrenaline, to the untrained eye. The scene was a masterpiece of coastal elegance. The lighting designers had bathed the room in a soft, amber glow that made diamonds sparkle and erased wrinkles. The centerpieces were towering constructs of white orchids and driftwood, costing more per table than most families in Merriwick spent on groceries in a month. A string quartet played a seamless loop of Vivaldi in the corner, audible enough to suggest culture, but quiet enough to allow for the transaction of gossip. But I was not looking with an untrained eye. I was looking at the room through the lens of a forensic auditor. I did not see a party. I saw a crime scene that had been decorated with silk ribbons. I stood near the entrance of the VIP holding area. Derek at my side. He looked devastating in his tuxedo, not because it was a designer label, but because he wore it with the indifference of a man who had worn Kevlar vests that weighed more. He was scanning the perimeter, his eyes tracking the movements of the venue security and the two men in plain clothes standing near the bar, who were definitely not waiters. "Target at 12 o'clock, Derek murmured, taking a sip of sparkling water. I followed his gaze. Tessa had arrived. She did not walk. She glided. She was wearing a gown of emerald silk that clung to her frame like a second skin, the fabric shimmering under the chandeliers. It was a dress that screamed for attention. A dress that announced she was the queen of this particular chessboard. Around her neck hung a diamond choker that I recognized from the insurance rider Richard had filed 3 years ago, a piece listed as an investment asset, behind her. My parents trailed like loyal courtiers. My mother was beaming, waving at people who were not looking at her, desperate to catch the eye of anyone with a title. My father looked less enthusiastic. He was tugging at his collar, his eyes darting around the room with the nervous energy of a man who knows he is walking on a frozen lake that is beginning to crack. Tessa paused at the top of the stairs, waiting for the photographers to notice her. When the flashbulbs popped, she tilted her head back, offering them the perfect angle. It was a performance of such practiced narcissism that it almost felt professional. "She looks like she won," Derek said quietly. "She thinks she has," I replied. "She thinks the email scare worked. She thinks I'm going to go up there and give a toast to the garden club." We did not have to wait in line. As soon as we stepped out of the shadows, a young man with an earpiece materialized at my elbow. He was wearing the lapel pin of the Diplomatic Security Service. "Mrs. Ashfield," he said, his voice low. "Mr. Ashfield, if you would come with me, we have a secure corridor for you." He did not ask to see our tickets. He did not check a list. He simply ushered us past the velvet rope, bypassing the frantic crush of socialites trying to get their QR codes scanned. I felt eyes on us. I felt the sudden, sharp turn of heads. In Merriwick, skipping the line was the ultimate currency. "Who is that?" I heard a woman whisper. "Is that the sister, the one who works for the city?" "That is the speaker," someone else corrected. "Look at the security. They are treating her like a head of state." We were led not to the general cocktail area, but to a roped-off section near the stage, the inner circle, as the invitation called it. This was Richard's natural habitat. This was where the big donors stood, swirling cognac and discussing interest rates. And there he was. Richard Calloway stood near the ice sculpture, laughing too loudly at a joke made by the mayor. He looked polished, his hair gelled to perfection, his cummerbund straining slightly against his waist. But I saw the sheen of sweat on his upper lip. I saw the way his hand shook slightly when he reached for a canapé. He spotted us. For a fraction of a second, his mask slipped, revealing a flash of pure terror. Then, the smile slammed back into place, a wide, predatory grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Daria Derek," Richard boomed, striding over with his arms wide, as if he hadn't spent the last week funding a campaign to discredit me. "You made it. We were worried. You know, Tessa said you were feeling under the weather." He clapped a hand on Derek's shoulder. Derek did not move. but his muscles turned to stone under the fabric of his jacket. Richard pulled his hand back quickly, as if he had touched a hot stove. "I am feeling quite clear-headed, Richard," I said. "Thank you for the concern." Good, Richard nodded, his eyes darting to the security agent standing 3 feet behind me. "Look, about the speech tonight, I know you have prepared something technical, but remember, this is a celebration. People are here to have fun. Maybe keep the accounting talk to a minimum, focus on the spirit of giving." He leaned in closer, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "I just put in a major donation this morning. Daria, 50,000? The club is really counting on this night to boost the prestige. We do not want to dampen the mood with heavy topics. We are all family here. Right?" He was begging, beneath the expensive cologne and the bluster. He was begging me to be a conspirator in his fraud. He wanted me to take his hush money and smile. "Family," I repeated. "Yes, that is a word you keep using." Before Richard could respond, a hush fell over the room. It wasn't the gradual quiet of a program starting. It was the sudden, sharp silence of a vacuum. The double doors at the far end of the ballroom swung open. Usually, the royal delegation was scheduled to arrive at 7:30. Just as dinner was served, it was currently 6:45. "They are early," Richard whispered, checking his Rolex. "They are never early. This messes up the flow." The Duke of Kensington walked in. He was a tall man with silver hair and the kind of posture that made everyone else in the room look like they were slouching. He was flanked by 4 security officers and Arthur Sterling. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Guests were bowing, curtsying, scrambling to get out of the way or get in the way, depending on their level of desperation. Tessa, who had been holding court near the bar, saw her moment. She straightened her spine, adjusted her diamond choker, and stepped forward, positioning herself perfectly in the Duke's path. She was the host committee chair self-appointed. This was her greeting. She extended her hand, a rehearsed smile on her lips. "Your Grace," Tessa began, her voice projecting just enough to be heard by the nearby photographers. "Welcome to Stonegate. I am Tessa Calloway." The Duke did not stop. He did not take her hand. He offered her a polite, distracted nod, the kind one gives to a piece of furniture that is slightly in the way, and walked right past her. Tessa stood there, her hand extended into empty air. The smile froze on her face, turning into a rictus of shock. The Duke walked straight through the crowd, ignoring the mayor, ignoring the club president, and walked directly toward the VIP section. He stopped in front of me. "Ms. Snowcroft," the Duke said. His voice was warm, resonant, and loud enough to carry to the back of the room. I dipped my head in a respectful nod. "Your Grace, I was reading your addendum on the flight over," the Duke said, grasping my hand in a firm handshake. "The section regarding the misuse of historical preservation funds, fascinating work, truly rigorous. You have given us a blueprint for modernizing our entire oversight committee." The room was so quiet you could hear the ice melting in the sculptures. "I am honored you found it useful, sir," I said. "Useful." The Duke laughed. "It is essential. In fact, I wanted to tell you personally before the madness begins. The delegation has voted to induct you as an honorary fellow of the Integrity Partnership tonight. We have a small pinning ceremony planned after your address." He turned to Derek. "And Mr. Ashfield," the Duke said. "Colonel Holloway tells me you are the man responsible for the grid logistics in Vermont. We could have used you in the Highlands last winter. Excellent to meet you." Derek shook the Duke's hand. "The pleasure is mine." The Duke turned back to the room, seemingly unaware that he had just dropped a nuclear bomb on the social hierarchy of Marrowick. "Well," the Duke said to the room at large, "shall we sit? I am eager to hear what Daria has to say." He gestured for me to walk with him. I walked past Tessa. She was still standing in the middle of the floor, her hand slowly lowering to her side. Her face was pale, drained of all blood. The narrative she had spun for 10 years that I was the charity case, the little sister who needed help, the nobody had just been incinerated in less than 60 seconds. The Duke hadn't just acknowledged me. He had deferred to me. I saw my parents standing behind her. My mother's mouth was open. My father was staring at me. And for a second, I saw him touch his back pocket, where his wallet was. We moved to the head table. I took my seat to the right of the Duke. Derek sat on my other side. Tessa and Richard were seated at table 12, near the kitchen doors. I could see them from my vantage point. Richard was drinking his whiskey very fast. Tessa was staring at her plate, her knuckles white as she gripped her fork. But Tessa Calloway was a fighter, a dirty fighter, but a fighter nonetheless. She wasn't going to go down without trying to draw blood. As the salad course was being cleared, Tessa stood up. She wasn't supposed to speak. She wasn't on the program, but she walked over to the head table, holding a glass of champagne. Her eyes were bright, manic. She approached the Duke, but she looked at me. "A toast," Tessa said, her voice trembling slightly but loud enough to interrupt the Duke's conversation with the mayor. Security stepped forward, but I waved them back. Let her speak. Let everyone see. "To my sister," Tessa said, smiling a smile that looked like broken glass. "It is so wonderful to see you functioning so well. Daria. We were all so worried after your episode earlier this week. You know, with the stress and the confusion." She turned to the Duke, widening her eyes in mock concern. "Daria works so hard. Your Grace, sometimes she gets overwhelmed. We have to be very careful with her fragile state. I just hope the pressure of tonight is not too much for her. We would hate for her to have another break." It was a vicious, calculated strike. She was trying to paint me as mentally unstable in front of the royal delegation. She was trying to validate the fake email she had sent, to plant a seed of doubt that everything I was about to say was the rambling of a hysterical woman. The table went silent. The Duke frowned, confusion clouding his face. I opened my mouth to respond, to defend my sanity, but Derek beat me to it. He didn't stand up. He didn't raise his voice. He just turned in his chair and looked at Tessa with a look of such profound disappointment that it felt heavier than anger. "Tessa," Derek said. His voice was calm, deep, and carried the weight of absolute authority. "We are here to discuss international financial law. We are not going to use made-up family drama as a tip for the audience." Tip for the audience. He reduced her attack to what it was: a cheap performance, a desperate attempt to buy attention with scandal. "I was just concerned," Tessa stammered, realizing that the room was not nodding in sympathy. They were staring in horror. She had broken the cardinal rule of high society: never let the messy parts show. "If you are concerned," Derek continued, "you can listen to her speech. It is very clear and very stable." He turned back to his dinner, dismissing her. Tessa stood there for a second, stripped naked in front of the people she wanted to impress. No one raised a glass to her toast. No one smiled. She was just a woman in a green dress standing where she wasn't wanted. She turned and walked back to table 12. Her shoulders were hunched. The Queen was dead. The lights dimmed. The spotlight hit the podium. The Master of Ceremonies, a baritone from the BBC, stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "distinguished guests, it is my privilege to introduce our keynote speaker, a woman whose work has redefined the standards of civic integrity. Please welcome Mrs. Daria Snowcroft." The applause started. It was polite at first. Then it grew. The Duke was clapping. My cousin Julian, at a table in the back, was clapping with his hands above his head. I stood up. My legs did not shake. My heart rate was steady at 65 beats per minute. I looked at Richard. He was staring at me with the eyes of a man watching the executioner sharpen the axe. I looked at Tessa. She was weeping silently, looking into her wine glass. I walked to the podium. I placed my notes on the stand. I adjusted the microphone. I looked out at the sea of tuxedos and diamonds. I saw the faces of the people who ran this town, the people who thought money was a shield that could block out the sun. I realized then that I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to be angry. I just needed to be the one thing they were terrified of. I needed to be accurate. I took a breath, leaned into the mic, and let the silence stretch for one long, delicious second. The trap was closed. Now, I just had to check the catch. The microphone was cold under my fingers, a stark contrast to the heat rising in my cheeks. I looked out at the sea of faces, 300 of the wealthiest people in Massachusetts, all staring at me with a mixture of curiosity and dread. I did not start with a joke. I did not thank the host committee. I did not acknowledge the floral arrangements. "We are taught," I began, my voice amplified and clear, bouncing off the vaulted ceiling, "that status is something you can buy. We are taught that if you pay the initiation fee, if you wear the right pin, if you sit at the right table, you are safe, you are valid, you are important." I paused. I let my eyes drift to table 12. Richard was gripping his wineglass so hard I thought it might shatter. Tessa was staring at her napkin, her shoulders hunched as if she were waiting for a physical blow. "But status is a rental," I continued. "You pay for it every day. You pay for it with your silence. You pay for it by looking the other way when the numbers do not add up. You pay for it by pretending that a $50,000 donation to a charity gala erases the fact that the money came from a shell company designed to hide profits from the community that built you." A murmur rippled through the room. It wasn't a roar. It was the sound of 300 people holding their breath at the same time. "In my line of work," I said, "we do not look at the clothes. We look at the ledger. And the ledger does not care about your last name. It does not care about your golf handicap. It only cares about the truth." I turned slightly, addressing the Duke of Kensington, who was watching me with an intensity that made the rest of the room fade away. "We have seen a rise in a specific kind of architecture in this country," I said. "Not buildings made of brick and mortar, but castles made of paper. We see charitable foundations that exist only to move cash from one tax haven to another. We see private clubs that act as laundromats for reputations." I looked back at the audience. I found my father's eyes. He was sitting up straight, his hand over his wallet pocket. He was nodding, a barely perceptible motion. "We tell ourselves it is harmless," I said, my voice dropping to a register that forced them to lean in. "We say it is just business. We say it is just how the game is played. But every dollar that is washed through these systems is a dollar that was stolen from a road, a school, a hospital, or a disaster relief fund." I saw Richard flinch. He knew. He knew I was talking about the generators. He knew I was talking about the flood barriers that never got built because the contract money went into a consulting fee. "Tonight," I concluded, "we are celebrating integrity, but integrity is not a medal you wear. It is a bill you pay, and unlike status, you cannot pay it with someone else's money." I leaned into the microphone for the final line, the one I had written in the dark, while my sister tried to erase me from the guest list. "There is a fear in this room that transparency will ruin us," I said. "But let me assure you, transparency does not destroy good people. It only destroys the paint." I stepped back. For 3 seconds, there was absolute silence. It was the kind of silence that happens after a car crash, before the sirens start. Then, the Duke of Kensington stood up. He brought his hands together, clap, 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 slow, deliberate, and loud. The sound broke the spell. Derek stood up next, then my cousin Julian, then the mayor. Realizing which way the political wind was blowing, jumped to his feet. Within 10 seconds, the entire room was standing. They were applauding. Some were applauding because they were moved. Most were applauding because they were terrified that if they didn't, they would look guilty. I did not smile. I did not wave. I stood still, witnessing the hypocrisy of the ovation. As the applause died down, Arthur Sterling stepped to the podium. He carried a velvet box and a rolled parchment. "Ms. Snowcroft," Sterling announced, "on behalf of the Royal Delegation and the International Integrity Commission, it is my privilege to invite you to join the Global Oversight Partnership as a lead fellow." He opened the box. Inside was a small silver pin, a lion holding a scale. "This is not a membership you can buy," Sterling said, his voice cutting through the room with British precision. It is a commission you must earn. We are honored to have your eyes on our books." He pinned it to my lapel. I looked at the silver lion. It was heavy. It felt real. And that was when I heard the sound. It was a strange sound, a high-pitched, strangled laugh that turned into a sob. I looked down at table 12. Tessa was laughing. Tears were streaming down her face, ruining her makeup, dripping onto her emerald silk dress. She was looking at the silver pin on my jacket. And then she was looking at the gold membership card that she had placed on the table next to her plate. She touched the card. Then she looked at me. It was the look of a woman who had spent her entire life collecting Monopoly money, only to realize at the end of the game that she couldn't buy a loaf of bread with it. She had traded her relationship with me, her integrity, and her peace of mind for a piece of plastic that I had just rendered worthless. But the night was not over. As I shook the Duke's hand, the side doors opened again. This time, it was not royalty. 4 men in dark suits walked in. They did not have the relaxed posture of party guests. They moved with the efficient, shark-like purpose of federal agents. The room went cold. The waiters stopped serving. The string quartet stopped playing. The men walked straight to table 12. They did not draw weapons. They did not shout. They simply surrounded Richard Calloway. The lead agent, a man with a face like a closed door, pulled a document from his jacket pocket. "Richard Calloway?" the agent asked. His voice carried in the silent room. Richard tried to stand up. He tried to summon the bluster of the man who had just donated $50,000. "Now see here," Richard stammered, wiping sweat from his forehead. "This is a private event. I am a platinum donor. You cannot just—" "We are serving you with a subpoena issued by the Department of Justice," the agent said. Extending the paper, "We are also executing a warrant for the seizure of electronic devices associated with the Calloway Family Foundation and Greenscapes Limited." Greenscapes Limited. The name hung in the air like a poisonous gas. "We need you to come with us to facilitate the collection of evidence," the agent continued. "Right now, sir." Richard looked around the room. He looked for an ally. He looked for the mayor, who was suddenly very interested in his shoes. He looked for the club president, who had turned his back to inspect a painting. He looked at Tessa. Tessa did not look at him. She was staring at the gold card on the table. She picked it up. Her fingers were trembling. She looked at the embossed words, "Full voting member." "You said it was clean," Tessa whispered. Her voice was barely audible, but in the dead silence, it sounded like a scream. "Richard, you told me the money was clean." "Tessa, honey, it is a misunderstanding," Richard pleaded, his voice cracking. "Call the lawyer. Just call the lawyer." "Please step this way, Mr. Calloway," the agent said, taking Richard firmly by the elbow. They marched him out. They walked him past the ice sculpture, past the head table, past the Duke of Kensington, who watched with a look of mild distaste. Richard Calloway, the man who had bought his way into paradise, was escorted out of it by the consequences of his own arithmetic. The room exploded. It wasn't applause this time. It was the frantic, buzzing energy of a hive that had been kicked. Phones were coming out. People were whispering, pointing, distancing themselves. I never liked him. I always suspected something about that foundation. Is the club liable? Did they accept the donation? Stonegate Harbor, the fortress of exclusivity, had just become a crime scene, and every person in that room was suddenly terrified that the spotlight I had turned on might swing toward them next. I did not stay to watch the sharks eat the wounded. I stepped off the stage. I walked straight to table 12. Tessa was sitting alone. The chair next to her was empty. The other guests at the table had scattered. Terrified of catching the contagion of scandal, she was holding the gold card. She was bending it, back and forth, watching the plastic turn white at the stress point. "Tessa," I said. She looked up. Her eyes were hollow. The emerald dress looked like a costume now, a mockery of a queen who had no kingdom. "He is gone," she whispered. "They took him, and they are going to freeze the accounts on Monday. Aren't they?" "Yes," I said. They are. I have nothing, she said. The house, the cars, this stupid membership. It is all going to go. She looked at me. You did this. You knew. I knew, I said. But I did not do it to you. Tessa, Richard did it. He used you. He used this club to hide what he was doing. You were just the shiny object he waved around so no one would look at his hands. I wanted it so bad, she sobbed. I wanted to be like them. I know, I said. I reached out and took her hand. It was limp. Come on, I said. We are leaving. I cannot leave, she said. Everyone is staring. Let them stare, I said. You are Daria Snowcroft's sister, and I am walking you out. I pulled her up. She was shaky on her heels. I put my arm around her waist, not the way she used to hold me for photos, to position me in the background, but to hold her up. We walked toward the exit. I saw my mother and father standing by the dessert table. My mother looked like she was about to faint. My father looked at me, then at Richard's empty chair, and he gave me a single, grim nod. He knew the bill had finally come due. We walked out into the cool night air. The valet stand was chaotic, but Derek was already there with the car. I opened the back door and helped Tessa in. She curled up on the seat, burying her face in the expensive silk of her dress. I got in the front. Derek looked at me. It is done, he asked. It is done, I said. We drove in silence for a long time. The lights of the Stonegate Harbor Country Club faded into the distance, a glowing ship sinking into the dark ocean. Daria, Tessa's voice came from the back seat. It was small, broken, yes. I told everyone you were a social worker because I was ashamed, she said. I looked at her in the rearview mirror. It was dark, but I could see the outline of her face. I know, I said. I was afraid, she continued. I was afraid that if you were successful, if you were powerful, then I would just be the girl who married rich. I needed you to be small so I could feel big. It was the most honest thing she had ever said. It was the truth, stripped of all the paint. I am not small, Tessa, I said. And you do not get to write my character description anymore. You are my sister. I will help you find a lawyer. I will help you pack the house when the bank takes it, but I will never again let you tell me who I am. She sniffled. Okay. And Tessa? Yeah. Throw the card out the window. What? The membership card. I said, You are still holding it. Throw it out. There was a long pause. Then, I heard the whir of the electric window going down. I heard a small flick sound as a piece of gold plastic spun out into the night, lost in the darkness of the highway. It is gone, she said. Good, I said. Now we can finally start acting like a real family, one that does not require a membership fee. I reached over and took Derek's hand. He squeezed it tight. The road ahead was long. There would be trials. There would be bankruptcy hearings. There would be scandal. But for the first time in my life, the air in the car felt clean. We weren't renting our dignity anymore. We owned it. Thank you so much for listening to this story of truth, consequences, and the high price of a golden ticket. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from a quiet room like Daria? Or perhaps on a busy commute? Please leave a comment below with your location and your thoughts on whether Tessa deserves a second chance. If you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe to the channel Juliet Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach even more listeners.